Great, thanks, Peter. So very happy and excited to be joined on stage by Brad Powers, who's the CTO at Passport. Brad has been spearheading the company's technology initiatives and leading development of products focused on kind of all aspects of the transit ecosystem. Prior to Passport, Brad built out the operations and development groups at Varian, and fun fact, led the largest P2P implementation to date for the United States Postal Service.
I'm not sure if anyone knows what P2P is, maybe? Purchase to pay, invoice automation, I don't know. This is just on my bio from LinkedIn.
It sounded impressive, so we...
They do now.
Yeah. Also joined by Carrie Dresfensick. She's a veteran product manager who's actually based here in the Triangle, and she's led product teams at a string of industry-leading companies over the last dozen years or so. She's currently senior product manager at Olo, which is a B2B solution for white label online ordering, and they're currently powering more than half of the public restaurants who offer digital ordering. Carrie oversees product development for integrated payment processing, mobile payments, and other market expansion opportunities. And last but not least, two-time PAYMENTSfn attendee, Nathan Adamson, co-founder and CEO at RadTab. He's driving the company's mission to open up a whole new realm of payments innovation in the hospitality industry. Nathan has a passion for pushing the boundaries of both technology and business models, and has led a wide range of initiatives focused on card not present, transparent gateways, tokenization, and AI fraud detection. So thanks to all of you for joining us, and we're going to talk broadly around innovation in the payment space. So I'll throw out some questions, and I will tag you it, or you can pick up as you will. So I first wanted to start by maybe looking backwards before we look forwards a little bit. And what are some of the most important innovations that you've seen in the payment space, say, over the last 2 to 3 years?
So I can start with that one. So mine is not much of a exciting consumer-facing technology innovation, but from the B2B SaaS perspective, the improvements in the merchant boarding process that a lot of providers and processors have rolled out, where you can basically light up a merchant account immediately. That's such a huge improvement over the process that used to take weeks or days to get that merchant account set up. And especially in the enterprise space, when you're potentially trying to launch a new brand that has hundreds or thousands of merchant accounts, that's a game changer for us.
I think for me, when I think of mobile payments or payments in general, I always go back to 2007, right? When the iPhone came out, it wasn't just a phone, it was a computer. And with apps and those advancements, we started getting APIs like Braintree, and then apps like Venmo appeared, and we started getting used to having payments on our phone. I think the calendar stuff, the social media stuff, that's always kind of been there. And really in the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen more payments with things like Uber and things like that on the rise.
Yeah, similar sentiment. In the past few years, it's been about relieving all the complexity that there's this big black box in Visa, MasterCard, and all the processors, and we've been getting very simple APIs to enable all of these different payment applications and functions within the business models that have been innovating.
And I think mobile banking too. Every bank has its own mobile app, and that was a really transition easy for people to kind of early adopt. Is they'll start with the mobile banking, and then once they got comfortable with that, they're okay with adding their card to another app that is a little bit newer and a little bit more fresh to them. So it was all about them kind of getting comfortable, where it became a little bit of a habit to I'm just now going to do this on my phone instead of doing it in person.
Yeah, I guess and I speak from the States because that's all I really know is North America business. But I know in China and India, the WePays, and that's really just popped in the past 5 years in the payment mechanisms that they're taking place. It's similar to to, I think, the telecom industry in Africa, right? Like they went straight to mobile for phones. And in India and China, like a lot of these things, like they're skipping the entire process of card issuance and going straight to you're paying with an app and a lot of push payment. So a lot of interesting stuff deriving out of those countries as well.
So I'm hearing a theme around kind of innovation in mobile, and if we think about kind of that as it was a really huge wave, and it really did unleash a whole bunch of new startups, new business models. Looking ahead now with a crystal ball, do you see the innovation continuing to be localized in mobile, or where do you see the next big wave, whether that's a tech wave or whether that's a business model innovation wave?
Well, for me, like, one of the most exciting things I've seen is like we're even like insurance companies. You know, Uber. You know, they bought that one company where you download the app, you drive around for 2 weeks, it learns your driving behavior, and then gives you an insurance quote based on that. And you're now just paying your insurance now through your phone. So, you know, we're getting used to, you know, any industry where it's okay that we're just going to do this all through mobile. And, you know, also I think there's going to be a huge wave in healthcare and, you know, going with deliveries, not only food delivery stuff, but also pharmaceutical deliveries, like people getting their medicine delivered to home. I'm going to see a lot of that, I think, coming in the next 2 to 3 years.
I think also the payment experience will just become more invisible to the consumer, that you'll just, you know, you'll transact and you'll pay for things, and it will just be, you know, it won't even be something that you actually have to think about. And, you know, especially in the restaurant space, things like voice ordering are becoming, you know, more popular. So I definitely think just the way that we purchase things is going to continue to become just more invisible to us. Yeah,
frictionless payments is probably the thing. I mean, right now everyone takes out an app, or you have to actually do something. And I don't know why I have to take out an app to do it, right? So the apps are a temporary thing, and hopefully, you know, the more biometric we get, right, with Amazon trying out those the grocery stores that are I don't know what the term is. Grab and go, yeah, and they just charge you on the way out, and based on biometrics, a lot of fraud and identification stuff. I can't wait to talk to Bart about what's going on at Shopify and how they detect all this fraud that happens, and like enabling so many merchants in the process. Like that's a huge thing that I think huge problems in fraud. Blockchain is another one. Like I don't think Bitcoin necessarily in the short term, but you know, blockchain, open ledgers is a good one. And then a lot of people have been focused on the B2C, and the B2B aspect is probably where a lot of, like, from a dollars perspective, it's probably like 1/10 of the money is consumer and 90% is business to business transactions taking place from payments. So that figuring out that problem and getting rid of a lot of the overhead and the currency conversion problems, and like there's a lot of stuff there and problems to solve. So I assume that we'll see a lot of good things come in that space.
And just to mention on the biometric stuff, it's amazing how quickly we've went from fingerprint to facial and now retinal coming out, you know, all in really a short span of a few years, mainly on the consumer side. And I'm even interested in things like they're getting into different biometric behaviors depending on how you hold your phone. You and me, we all enter in our credit card information completely different, or if we're paying for something on our phone, the differences are very, very slight. It is enough to say that may have been Brad or Carrie versus me making that payment. And getting that into the fraud stuff, I think, is really interesting. And being able to provide that to, you know, our B2B customers and just kind of guarantee that payment was authorized by the user who says they say they are.
So thinking about frictionless payments and building that seamless user experience, you know, that's our North Star as product makers, and it's not easy to get there, and presents some kind of unique challenges in terms of bridging different environments, bridging different user bases, bridging different, you know, commerce technologies. So I'm thinking about, you know, the experience of building out or attempting to build out a seamless user experience for an enterprise and SMB. It could be as simple as that. It could be, how do I marry the CP and the CNP world? It could be, you know, credit cards, and we just heard alternative payments, whole different universe. But with that end goal of driving a seamless user experience, how have you approached these challenges of building those kinds of bridges?
So at Olo, we've really focused on streamlining the operational sort of in-store experience for the actual restaurant employees. And, one thing that I have to balance is making sure that the experience works for the folks in the store and also works for the corporate level, brand level team. And I think, one challenge is trying to pull yourself back from trying to solve all the problems at once. So really being very focused on what it is that you're trying to solve and, really being intentional about saying what you're not going to do. So, for us, that means we don't do card present and we haven't gone into the SMB space. And it doesn't mean we wouldn't do that in the future, but really focusing now on, optimizing for all the different use cases. We work with so many different types of restaurants and different segments, and even though they, generally operate in a similar way, there's so much nuance that, solving for all those use cases as our first goal has been my priority.
I think the key word is like seamless, and like Carrie says, like when you're working with restaurants and bars, there's not one model, there's not like one universal type. They're all completely different. Their owners are different, and their employees are different, and also the training behind that. So really, for us, like at the very beginning, it was creating a product where that integration was the same for maybe that one bar and the next one down the street, and also that there was really no training needed. But for us, we don't focus on card present transactions either. We're all CMP, but it is tough because they have to get used to card not present transactions, and maybe in an industry they might have been in for 10, 15 years. So it's them kind of getting over that hump. But one of the big things now is like we are working with some contactless payment stuff where the person is at the bar at the restaurant. If they do want to use Apple Pay or GPay or even Samsung Pay, we can allow that, and they can still use some of RadTab's features as far as like items ordered and whatnot. So I think we're in a really interesting gap right here where we're still dealing with a lot of people that do carry plastic around, but I think we're slowly starting to see a lot of the cards disappear. And the problem is with a lot of bars and restaurants, the infrastructure is still built for card present transactions. It's not really completely built for people just to pay on their phones. So it's kind of like we're waiting for a whole nother level of industry to like kind of catch up to where we're at, like here.
Yeah, we have some similar problems that I didn't relate to bars very much, but similar issues in government, and the fact that there's the accessibility option, right? That we have to have payment options for all, and so going 100% mobile is probably a pipe dream for me, in that we would have everything flowing through our apps, but then that kind of gets back to like how do you work around and make that experience seamless, or at least give the operators, the governments, the same feeling or frictionless. So extending upon those APIs and pushing the transaction down into the experience. Like, do I think that maybe the in-car OEMs would do something like that? Would you take the experience into that direction and remove the payment in that method? So. I don't know. I hear a lot about like conversion as well, and getting people to use these things. And we have this big stick at the end of our conversion process, and if you don't pay for parking or for the bus, you get like fined. So our thing is not paying your $2 bar tab, you get a $100 ticket. Right, so it's interesting in like making this experience like super seamless and frictionless. It really doesn't matter, but it matters because we care about it. Yeah. If you don't pay for your beer, you don't get your beer, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, once you open a tab, it's pre-authorized on the machine. Either the bartender is going to close it, or you're going to walk out and it's going to close itself. So you're pretty much locked in, and the only way you're not going to pay that tab is you're going to have to talk to the GM, and they're going to have to void all the items that are on your tab, and then it's a $0 amount, and then we can now void it on the app. So kind of like Brad says, like once your card is started and items are ordered, you're in. I mean, that's it. So.
Yeah, so I think a theme that we're hearing again and again, we heard from Michelle this morning about innovating within constraints and being aware of your constraints, but seeking not to be limited by them. And so, obviously in the payments industry, it's heavily regulated, so there's burdens of compliance, and that's one constraint. Carrie, you mentioned, really developing a disciplined product strategy is about choosing what to say no to. So we're seeing, the idea of having to push forward with innovation in the face of some of these constraints, and I'm curious about how you have dealt with that, each of you, in your specific business scenarios, and also around business model constraints as well. So not just the technology, not just waiting for the tech to catch up.
Well, I know for me, our biggest struggle was like for certain of the point of sales that we integrate with, there's licensing behind that. And there's a whole, for each individual one, there's like a business proposal that you have to go through, and there's agreements and things like that. And it's really tough to talk to some of those really big companies, especially if you're in the planning stage, right? And I think one of the things that was maybe the hardest for us, but I'm so glad we did it, is we started that really from day one. Because we knew without those partnerships or those agreements in place that we weren't going to really get anywhere. We don't mind fighting, the wall and the type of regulation, but we wanted to work together with them. And I think instead of fighting it, if you work together with them, that can really benefit you in the long run. And creating the right dialogue and saying, hey, we're not trying to compete with you. We're trying to help the technology and the products that you're selling. We're trying to add on top of that and be almost like a premium feature, and for a reason for why your dealers should tell your customers why you should have this point of sale. So that was really strong for us, but it's an uphill battle right from the beginning. And I think if you know that going in, you're kind of prepared for it.
So Brad, you have the double whammy of government compliance, payments compliance, and still seeking to kind of push that consumer experience forward, innovation forward. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think the government's interesting in that they want to provide these great the service to their constituents, but still have their constituents' rights recognized. So we're dealing with a lot of like the right to be forgotten, and what is the minimal amount of information that is necessary to complete a lot of these transactions, and ethical data, right? Like the concept of like, what are we really doing with the data? We don't do anything. We're just doing parking or transit. But I mean, we've been hearing like a lot about, we're starting to work in the micromobility space and try to help the governments facilitate the use of their streets in an effective manner. And when we start looking at these, like the limes and birds, you can start to put together pretty clear patterns of who these people are and what they do and where they go. And I know Visa and MasterCard and those guys can do that stuff. I mean, they have a lot better footprint and like there's a lot of good data out of the payment space, and from the government side, it's trying to like bridge that gap and like, hey, that's not the intent of the service that we're trying to offer. And so, what are we using the data for? Is it, how do we present it in an anonymized fashion for them to, make decisions on like planning streets and transportation, and if we're going to build more roads, or how we're going to tax people or toll people when you start using roads, and where parking is going to be available. I mean, there's a lot of good data that can help them intelligently do that stuff, but you just start to cross the gaps of what starts to get risky from anonymization, and just, you don't want the government to know everything about you. I don't.
Neither do I.
So from my perspective, the constraints of the industry and all the different players have actually led to, in some cases, a need to actually take more control of sort of the payment experience on behalf of our merchants. And so in terms of, looking at business models, today we process on behalf of our merchants, but we're finding that in order to offer the best merchant experience and really control, the full life cycle, that we need to consider taking more control over all of the different aspects of, accepting a payment. So, we're starting to look at, does it make sense for us to become a PayFac? Should we maybe go more of a hybrid model? Do we need to take on more of the customer service aspect of that with our merchants? Because we're finding that, under our current model, we support so many different processors, which is great because that means that our merchants can use who they want, but it also means that we have less control over that merchant experience.
That's an interesting point on that. So we went the PayFac route, and a lot of it was we did a lot of things around reducing the risk of the governments we're providing service for, and to try to offload a lot of that work. So whether it be PCI compliance or SOC, removing those controls really allowed them to, reduce risk. So that was a great point.
Yeah, and also if you have like more control, especially over the processor stuff, I think that helps with like chargeback, because then you kind of have more of the data on your side. And a lot of the merchants I've dealt with, they like that. They like the idea of them being able to maybe just take care of their customers and do what they do best, right? Which is like serving customers, making food, making drinks. They really don't give too much care about the payments as long as they get paid and everything goes through correctly, and they're not getting letters in the mail from credit card companies and banks that's saying this is, you charge back and you got to go through the dispute process, which is a real pain in the ass because chargeback disputes, like literally the whole idea of like how it's done was invented before the internet. So it's like it's amazing, like all these parties are involved and it's just a huge pain. Like, and that's the biggest thing I get from bars and restaurants is like, I think the mobile apps are cool. I think being able to pay on your phone is really cool. But how can you help me in chargeback disputes? How can you help me there? And that's really kind of where we're involving RadTab is with like the AI fraud stuff, and pretty much guaranteeing that we can help the services that they provide are getting paid for.
A lot of those payment gateways, when you talk about user experience and how they're and what they actually enable, so doing 25 different gateways or trying to integrate with all these different providers, it does start to limit your user experience and screw it up. So that's that, like where we start to talk about vertical integration. Yep. And like that makes a huge difference in building a better user experience.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more on your thoughts on vertical integration as an innovation strategy. We just had a great presentation on Shopify payments, and we're seeing Square and other companies kind of adopt this approach. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's the kind of model we are taking on as well, right? We've got 600 plus different government entities we are processing for. And we're now processing 350,000 credit card transactions a day. So vertically integrating is like anything we can do to strip out half pennies or half a pennies is making a huge difference. That's just we didn't necessarily start with the vertical integration in mind, but it's definitely adapted our process and where we can find savings or where we can increase our efficiencies or speed or the convenience of us doing everything end to end, so we can from a performance standpoint or a reliability standpoint. You guys deal with the same thing, right? You're supporting 200 different gateways. There's always one of them is screwing up. So
never.
So not having to deal with all of those is nice. Yeah.
So I definitely see that as a trend that will continue in the SMB space. Small business owners want to focus on the service or the product that they're providing. They don't want to be doing an RFP process for technology providers and trying to, sift through all that information. I think on the enterprise side, I definitely see that changing as well, but I think it'll be much slower just because there's so many different technology partners out there, and, with a lot of the innovation in APIs, there's been a lot of integration efforts. So I don't necessarily see that really consolidating in the enterprise space as quickly as it has in the SMB space.
Yeah, when I think of like vertical integration, like kind of goes all the way back to like Henry Ford and like the Model T, like where he made the car, they did all the parts, and they also sold the car. Kind of the same thing Tesla is doing now, right? Where there's no like middleman dealer. We also are seeing that in the point of sale market. Like Toast is a big one that's like coming up, and they do all that in house. And Shopify and Square are doing the same thing, and they've been acquiring companies left and right. Like Magic Hand in Montreal, you guys acquired, and Square they acquired their own processor company, and Bookkeep or for their accounting and management stuff. So I think I like vertical integration, and the reason why is you kind of control that brand experience all the way through. You can pretty much make it. It's yours, and I think you can control the experience a lot better versus if you're working with another third-party company. I just think it's like kind of tough. If you don't have the capital to do that, if you're a smaller startup, it's a little tougher. But I can definitely see why you save more money in the long run, right? So it's all about the money at the end of the day.
Great. Well, I know we're coming up on time here. Wanted to give the audience a chance to ask any questions. You can raise your hand, or I think we may have a mic somewhere.
You talked about a couple things. One is government, and the other is kind of mobile payment. And I'll speak later, but I'm in the tolling sector, the toll road stuff. I was one of the founders of EasyPass, for instance. And right now, that sector is like hungry for what you deliver. So all these toll agencies grew up independently, right? And had their own little pieces going on and own little agreements with everybody. And now, because of interoperability and mobility as a service and transit and tolling and parking and rideshare all coming together, we're starting to get into how do we do that? We're starting to develop hubs. Are any of you looking at that as an innovation?
Yes. Last year we signed an agreement with the Pennsylvania Turnpike to provide a mobile payment mechanism for tolling. So I'll talk to you after this. Okay, so you probably know half of our team. Yeah, I mean, the way tolling's going, it's going to be GPS based, right? We're not going to use transponders. The interoperability and the hub, building out the hub is where all the complexity lines in between all the agencies and interoperability. It's the same thing you have with all the different like the problems with all the banks and stuff in the Visa and MasterCard figured out. It's the same thing that has to be done in tolling, and the 32 different agencies or whatever and how they interoperate. That's what's going to happen. We are working on that. But the mechanism around GPS-based tolling is, well, I go back to like ethical data and tracking people, but presumably that's where we're going to be heading. As far as how you make up the shortfall in roadway funding, is everything's going to be a tollway, and we're going to start just tolling people for, if your car's stopped, we're charging it because we're charging for parking. If your car's moving, we're charging you for it moving. So they're going to make up the money somehow, and it sounds like the way things are pointing, it's GPS-based tolling. So whether it's an app in your car in the short term that's providing those GPS coordinates up so that we can toll you from point to point, or it's your car is going to be giving that GPS information up, and your account's going to get dinged with those things. It's coming. It's just a matter of time.
Do you think with the GPS tolling that roads now that don't have tolls will then say it's so easy to add it, let's add it and we'll make it cheap?
Yes.
And no one's going to disagree with 10 cents to go 3 miles on I-95 or whatever.
Yeah, in the right lane it might be 3 cents. In
Right,
the left lane it's going to be $1 a mile or something.
Yeah.
Or it depends on the hours. And part of it is about incentivizing when people drive, and back to the congestion problems. And if I can tell you to go drive somewhere go to work at 6 a.m. versus 8 a.m. and give it to you for
cheaper
a quarter, right? Maybe you'll go to work early.
Brad
I go just so I don't have to sit in traffic.
Brad also wants, if your car breaks down, it's a $5 automatic flat fee.
Yeah.
Side of the road.
Sounds like it's...
One thing you did mention, you hit right on. So the gas tax is not covering, the cost of infrastructure. And that's why you're starting to see things like cordon pricing, all around the city in New York and a whole bunch of other cities. But the reality, and I've done a pilot on this with the federal government, with ATI, which Sharon runs for me, it is actually mileage-based user fee, which is GPS-based type of road, time of day, what lane, traffic dependent, right? So it's hopefully the gas tax goes away, and it's just a mileage-based user fee. So you would pay for what you use. It's kind of like a toll. So every road would be tolled. I don't see
Kinda
that
like a
happening
toll.
tomorrow, but probably within 10 years or so. There's just no way to fund what we're doing.
I agree. We're trying to help out, if that's a real help.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, you've
Justin.
probably seen me before. You talked a lot about, one of the things I guess is just more of a cautionary tale from our discussions with merchants. We see sort of service providers stand up this idea where they'll support a lot of different gateways. So they go out to solve a problem in the marketplace. They see more effective online ordering, more effective ordering in a restaurant. Fundraise from yesterday, let's have a more effective charity payment platform. They run into frustrations working with multiple payment providers, so they say, let's do it ourselves, become a PayFac, and have an end-to-end experience. And the initial drive is better customer experience. What we do hear from merchants like that, that I'll speak with, is the company changes, right? Like, so the initial goal was to have the best fundraising platform. Now it becomes really a payments company that dangles these features off to get you so that they can do the processing on their behalf. And so there's a loss of alignment in terms of what their public-facing sort of story is. Hey, we want to be the best at doing this. Suddenly, like over time, they change into a payments company, and so the features they build, the things they support, it's not like, is this going to, the question changes from, does this make us the best platform to do this, to does this drive the highest adoption, and or the further upstream you go, the bigger customers, the harder it is to get them to move all that payments over. So I'm not disputing, and I think there's a lot of really good reasons for why people, make that change and become a PayFac and verticalize and own that whole piece. But just a cautionary tale is to think about what that does for your product strategy, for your culture, for the company, and for what you look like in 2 or 3 years, and at least understanding that, and maybe embracing that you're becoming primarily a company that monetizes via payments, and what that might mean for the product in the long run. That's just a thought.
Yeah, I appreciate those insights. The intent was never, I don't think our intent was never to have to do it. It kind of came out of a necessity to strip costs, and I don't know if that is our best part of our business either. And still, yeah, I mean, we're not. It's how far you go through the process, right? Like, yeah, how deep you get, and there's parts that I still consider. If we go into another country, how really deep we get in those parts, right? Like, I don't necessarily want to get too deep to explore something and figure it out, and the complexities that I'm the cautionary tale of the speech earlier, and trying to figure out different countries. I don't want to have to figure that stuff out. So, but once, yeah, like if there's one piece that you can pick, I mean, the breadth of, like, when I think about the Spreely model, right? Like, it's like, hey, I can do it with one, which is cool. If there's a huge consolidation in one, then it feels like maybe you have to do something. So I can see it both ways.
Yeah, we've definitely, been slow to pull the trigger on that for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. And, just the options that are out there now, that you can really take more of a hybrid model of, owning more of that merchant onboarding experience without actually, taking on the risk of those accounts. I think that's really interesting, because it does give you a lot more flexibility, and maybe allows you to kind of dip your toe into that without going the full PayFac approach.
And I think your comment on SMB versus enterprises, was spot on. Like, at the SMB level, those merchants probably just value the entire end-to-end experience. But as they grow and become more sophisticated, you might have a divergence between what their goals are, multi-chain restaurants, things like that, and still wanting your solution as the platform to order with.
Yeah, I think there's a huge difference with the enterprise model, like the locations and the chains. You know, for us, our sales pitch to any bar and restaurant is the fact that we use everything that they already have at that existing place. We use their point of sale. We're going to use their exact same layout with their employees and the way they clock them in. We're also going to be using the merchant processor. We want it to be almost like we have a zero footprint at that bar. Like you would have no idea that RadTab is installed there, and we wanted it like that. We wanted to really just kind of have like the consumer-facing side where they had the mobile app, and where we could use it and we could install in 5 minutes, and we're good to go. So no hardware, no change in processor, just seamless, completely seamless.
Well, I want to thank everybody on the panel. We picked such a shallow, narrow topic. I'm sure there's nothing else to say on innovation in payments. But thanks to all of you for your participation, and look forward to continuing the conversation over lunch.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.